Welcome to Lawyers Who Learn, where we explore how attorneys' engagement and lifelong learning fuels their growth. Join us to uncover these journeys and gain insights for your legal career.
Ted, thank you for joining Lawyers Who Learn. Super pumped to connect with you. We are both from Entrepreneur Organization. We've been members for a long time. I'm now part of YPO. I'm no longer an EO, but I think that's how we originally connected through LinkedIn, correct?
Yeah, I think somebody suggested from either EO or YPO that we connect. And yeah, I've been a member of EO, started in an accelerator, took another year to graduate into, I'll call it big EO, and I've been a member ever since.
And when did you join?
2012 into big
Okay.
EO. Yeah,
Oh,
it's
very
been
cool.
and I've been a member of two chapters, Charlotte, and then moved to St. Louis and joined the St. Louis chapter.
I just went to Charlotte to look at school. We looked at Davidson.
Nice.
Twins, yeah, pretty cool. Have you ever seen that documentary on Underrated with Stephen Curry?
It's awesome.
It's like a perfect promotional video for the school. But that's a talk for another day. What I'm going to do for you, Ted, is I'm just going to briefly read your bio, or not your bio, just like your timeline that I put together just to save you time from having to do it. And then we'll start talking if that's cool. So let me know if I get anything right or wrong. 2008 around, you joined Microsoft as essentially a database engineer. And it looks like soon thereafter, you started your own company called AcroWire. And you had partnered with a company called Handshake in 2010. And you were essentially it was a vendor in the legal tech space. And from what I understand and with the bio I saw, you partnered with them for a long time until 2018 when Handshake was acquired. And then you started doing your own things for the next few years. And then in 2021, 22, you rebranded and relaunched AccuWire as Infodash. And it seems a lot of things have accelerated since you've done that. And you consider and call it the first or the leading cloud intranet and extranet platform. And then one of the things that really stood out to me is in 2024, you won the Innovative Leader of the Year award from the International Legal Technology Association, which is pretty cool to hear. I know I summed up way too quickly and probably got some things wrong, but I just wanted to give a sense if that's essentially the story there.
Yeah, it goes back a little bit further. I actually was working for Microsoft 25 years ago in the late 90s, 99, 2000. So journey goes back a little bit further than that, but you got everything else.
Cool. So I'm definitely want to dive into that. I want to dive into your podcast. I want to dive into the award. And I wanted to focus on the fact that you're not a JD, you're not an attorney, but you've been focused on this market for a long time and you speak to a lot of innovative people who are, and I think that's super cool. But before we go to any of these things, I want to ask you a question because you do a lot of podcasts and you're interviewed a lot. What is something that you wish somebody interviewed you or asked you about that they don't, that you've learned throughout the years and that you've learned and grown either about the marketplace or about being an entrepreneur that you would wish you could talk about more?
So I have an undergraduate degree in math and I have an MBA. And I went into the MBA program thinking that I was going to learn about how to run a business. And that's not really what happened. The MBA program was worth my time, but I got things out of it that were completely different than I thought going in. So an MBA program does not really teach you how to be an entrepreneur. I actually carved out a custom concentration of entrepreneurship in the MBA program at UNC Charlotte. So my undergrad is from UNC Chapel Hill. My MBA is from UNC Charlotte. And I did everything I could to try and extract as much value for the entrepreneur journey as I could as part of the program. And it still wasn't great, but I did get plenty of other things out of it. I traveled internationally. I went all over the world with any class that had a international component to it. I signed up for. Went to China, all over Eastern Europe. Went to the Atacama Desert in and spent 12 days on an expedition. It's one of those things, the MBA program, you really get out of it what you put in. And I think a lot of people go in with preconceptions that turn out to be a little different than reality.
But just to, it cut off for half a second while you were talking. If that happens again, I'm going to switch my Wi-Fi. You were saying during the MBA program, you travel to all those different places while you were in the program.
Correct.
As part of the program, you can do abroad, and you took advantage of that.
Yeah, these were so I never studied abroad officially, but I took like the class that I went to China with was the first international travel. It was like contemporary real estate issues in Hong Kong. So Hong Kong transitioned from imperial control in the 90s over to a standalone government and then under Chinese rule. And the real estate market became really interesting. And Hong Kong is one of the most high demand real estate markets in the world. So we went over there and studied. I went to Eastern Europe as part of I forget exactly the name of that class, but we toured the GE facility over there. We were in Hungary, we were in Slovakia, we were in Germany, and saw it was a very valuable experience. And then the Atacama expedition was a 10-day non-credit activity that the school put together as part of a kind of a leadership development program. And we hiked up a 14,000 foot or 12,000 foot mountain. I think Machuca was the name of it.
Where is this?
This is in Chile, South America.
Got it.
In the Atacama Desert. And we learned a lot of leadership skills as part of that. When I look back on like, where did I really get the most value out of the program? It was on those trips, seeing China right before the '08 Olympics and understanding all of the interesting dynamics in the Hong Kong real estate market, with China being Hong Kong being free market, how they stitched that together, essentially. Just there was a lot of valuable learning, and then also just the networking. I met people that I still keep in touch with today. I completed that program 17 years ago, and that was where the value was as part of my journey.
That can be repeated whether it's in college or in law school or as an MBA. And it's not necessarily, neither of us are necessarily experts, but it's something I think about a lot. What is the current value of a traditional 4-year education right now, which, especially with my twins going to college in 2 years, which can be upwards in a private college with full board and tuition, $90,000 versus what you get from life experience and travel. And so I appreciate you sharing that and those journeys, because those are the things that you remember from doing that. And so you left, and I'm not going to go through your bio completely, but I'm just curious how you went from that to Microsoft to building your own company to focusing in the legal space. I was just curious of that evolution, just so we can understand why you're now in the legal space for 20 plus years as a non-lawyer.
Yeah. So I started my entrepreneurial journey actually during my undergrad. My mom owned restaurants in the Raleigh, North Carolina area and was getting bombarded with bounce checks. She put me in charge of collecting them. I kept the service fee, paid her the face amount. And I was making like $800 a week as a part-time job in like 1993. So I decided to take a year off of school. I started a business collection agency. We actually grew it to be a decent size organization. We had 1,100 clients in 23 states. And I was so focused on the IT aspect of the business because we were bootstrapping. So I couldn't afford a big ERP package to manage things, interfacing with the credit bureau, taking placements from clients, sometimes online. This was in the 90s. So things were very rudimentary. We were getting CDs in the mail. That's how things happened back then. And then I decided my real passion was technology. So at that point, my mother and brother, who were partners in the restaurant business, sold it, came to work with me, had another brother join. And then in 99, I said tech skills were hot and I had some good ones. And that's where my passion was. So I ended up turning the business over to them and going to work for Microsoft in Charlotte. That's what took me there. And I just started consulting on the side while I was at Microsoft, as a lot of tech guys do. And in '08, I realized that the side gig was making more than the day job. So I decided to cut bait and with corporate America and jump out on my own. So interesting journey, entrepreneur, corporate entrepreneur again. And you know what? That was a really valuable process. Going to work I was at Microsoft for about a year, and then I spent 9 years at Bank of America. So big, 300,000 employees back then. I'm sure there are more now. But I learned a lot about how big organizations do things and learned what to do and what not to do as part of that experience. And I've been able to apply a lot of that to my entrepreneurial journey. The legal thing just happened in the early days. When you're a consultant, you'll say yes to anything that anyone who will write you a check, even if you're not qualified to do it, you figure it out later. And VDI, virtual desktop infrastructure, was crazy hot in law firms then. So we used VDI to manage our offshore developers to make sure they weren't IT security, essentially. And the vendor, Citrix, said, you know what, you guys know this product better than a lot of our integrators. Why don't you, we'll send you deals if you'll deliver them. So they started sending us deals, and they were all law firms. So we started working with law firms that way. And then we realized where our capabilities mapped in the law firm world, and the rest is history.
And what were you actually doing for the law firms?
Deploying VDI infrastructure and moving them to the cloud for
When you say
messaging.
VDI,
VDI is virtual desktop infrastructure. So that's when, back then laptops were, if you had a laptop that was powerful, big, heavy, clunky, if you lost it, this is before the days when everything was encrypted. You'd have your clients' M&A agreements on your laptop, unencrypted, big no-no. When you operate in VDI, as long as you're encrypted, you're essentially running a desktop in a server somewhere.
Got it. So at some point, did you decide, at one point, did you decide just to focus on law because that made the most sense? And when was that?
You mentioned EO. My EO peers at the time had a saying that really resonated with me, which is the riches are in the niches. And the legal tech world is a very walled garden. Lawyers operate on the concept of precedence. And if you can establish yourself as a trusted provider in that space and you have referenceable work, it's easy to get new work. Establishing that beachhead is difficult, but once you're there, once you're in. So that's how it happened. We just got so much traction in the law firm world, and then figure out where we could deliver the most value. And that kind of took us where we are today.
And what year was that?
That would have been early 2010s. So
early 2010s, you've been focused fully on the legal space.
Yeah. Yep.
Fast forward to 2020 or so, and maybe we'll go backwards. You rebranded and relaunched the company to Infodash. To tell us what you did not learn in MBA school how to do, what you learned on the job to serve lawyers better.
Yeah, so it was professional services is just like running a law firm. You bill for your time. It's difficult to scale because it's so people dependent, and when you have excess utilization capacity, that hits your bottom line hard. So and the revenue is not recurring. The projects are discrete. They have a beginning and an end. So it's a difficult business to manage. And we always knew we wanted to play in a space where recurring revenue was the paradigm and where we weren't essentially just reselling time. So we started in 2018 to build a product, and it took us several years. We took lots of twists and turns along the way, lots of dead ends. But in 2019, we got pretty far down the path. Then the pandemic hit, and it really put a huge emphasis on remote work. And that's when law firms are technology laggards in the most purest sense of the word. Most other industries migrated to the cloud in 2014, 2015. They started their journey. Law firms didn't start their journey. Big law didn't start their journey until really around the pandemic. So we decided pretty early on we were going to be a cloud-only platform, even if that meant we couldn't serve every law firm. So we were just perfectly positioned. And our system integrates with Microsoft Teams and SharePoint Online, which is Microsoft 365, which exploded during the pandemic. So we've gotten so much traction as a result of us taking a bit of a bet, which is we know law firms are going to the cloud. They're late, but they're going, and that bet is paid off.
Taking a bet and taking a risk on something new and shifting from service to product is every service company's dream. Most cannot realize it effectively. I'm sure you know this, correct? It's almost impossible to do, even though it makes sense to do it. First of all, how big a bet was it? Did you have to build a new product from scratch? Did you have to hire a team? Because mistakes that we've made before and other people make is, okay, we're building something new. Everybody now, 60% of your time focus on our core and 40% we'll focus on the new product. And it's a good way to burn everybody out. So tell us a little bit about that leap and the risk that you took and what you learned during that process.
Yeah, I'm a pretty risk averse guy, like most attorneys, and we mitigated that risk by doing this incrementally. So we didn't just fire all our consulting clients and decide to dump all our capital into R&D around the product. We did it incrementally. So the first couple of, I guess it would be the last couple of deals that we had, we put a stake in the ground and said, as part of our master services agreement, we own the IP out of this engagement. And that was a tug of war. We almost lost a couple of deals as a result, but we had one client who really believed in us, massive 1,000 attorney labor and employment firm. And man, has that been a great relationship for both of us since then. They're our flagship client. We have tons of 1,000 attorney firms as clients now, but they were the first one to really believe in us. And so we did it incrementally, and we're bootstrapped. So we've taken very little venture funding, like low single digit percentage of the company. And we were able to do that by attacking the problem piece by piece and not just flipping a switch and saying, today we're services, tomorrow we're product. It happened. It was an evolution.
Just so I understand, during that decade, I assume based on what I'm hearing, you moved on from obviously just doing virtual desktop. Were you building custom intranet and extranets? Is that where the switch was?
Yeah, we were. And so I would say probably 80% of our work was doing bespoke custom solutions in the same space where our product plays today. And we partnered with a company who had a product that did what we do today. And we realized it just wasn't good. So yeah, we had a lot of exposure to the problem domain and the industry that we were serving. We made the leap, which
So
also,
go ahead, finish.
I was just going to say that helped tremendously because when we finally went to market, I had an extensive Rolodex of people to talk to where I was trusted, and it made the sailing much more smooth than it would have been otherwise.
And as this interview is shaping up, I think, at least at this point, like, I think who will benefit from this conversation is legal tech entrepreneurs. And of course, this is, it's been 20 years since I've been doing this. And as we both know, there was not really the term legal tech entrepreneurs 20 years ago. We were just trying to build tools. And now that's a whole multi-billion-dollar industry and lots of funding, and Clio is leading the way. And I just want to go back to that moment where you gave your terms and conditions or the contract and you own the IP. Did you, as consideration, I guess, I assume you lowered your price significantly because it's something you could reuse? Was that sort of was that the consideration that they gave, or no, it's just, this is what we do now? Just trying to give some inspiration to any other service firm in the legal space that's trying to switch as well.
Yeah, we actually did not drop our price. The carrot that we dangled was we have an existing framework, which we did, that handled some of the basic things that we wouldn't have to rebuild, right? We had a authentication framework, we had a content delivery framework, we had experience from building. So in the 17 years that we've been working with firms, I've worked with 110 AM law firms. I don't know what that number was when we made the switch, but it was significant. So all the expertise and intellectual property that we brought to the table allowed us to have a fairly good negotiating position. And like I said, it was a struggle getting through some of those MSA conversations with law firms, but we got through it and we're on the other side.
And just so I understand, were you essentially getting the client, then building the platform? Like SaaS platform with those first couple clients. So they were like the test case versus building something that you weren't sure that would be used.
Exactly. And essentially we got paid to build it. That's the best scenario. It's hard to align those stars perfectly. We were able to do it. Created a very long path for us. But at the end of the day, we own almost all of the company. It's myself and I have 3 partners, and it was worth the extra time. And when we launched, we had perfect product market fit, which it's very rare. Many legal tech startups, just tech startups in general, they pivot multiple times because they're not sure really of the problem domain. We nailed it because we'd been solving those problems. Yeah.
How, just so I can get a sense, how custom is Infodash today per client? And are you actually servicing them, or is it fully pretty much self-service on their own?
Yeah. So we like to say we can get you pretty much 80% down the field. Firms have different levels of appetite around how much they want to invest in customization. We have a pretty big professional services team. We're not huge today. We're about 35 people, but probably 20 of those, maybe even 25 of those are professional services and product engineers essentially.
Yeah.
So yeah, in a perfect world, we would sell a license, move on, sell another one. The reality is we do have to wire up the integrations, and we actually deploy our solution in their environment, which also slows us down. So we service law firms with 100 attorneys and up exclusively. There's only 600 law firms on the planet that have 100 attorneys. So this model is scalable to 600 firms. If I had 600,000 customers, we could never deploy this model. It just wouldn't work.
That is such a great recognition that, like, sometimes we all sometimes know, and maybe some don't even know this, but when you get to 100 attorneys or more, there's only 600 firms that exist. And when you get to the AmLaw 200 or the AmLaw 100, we're talking about 100. And there's a lot of legal tech vendors going after these 600 firms, and you do that. So it brings me to, I wrote this down already, and this kind of reaffirmed it, is like relationships. What have you done for yourself? How do you invest in these relationships? What have you learned in those process? How deep do you invest in these relationships? What kind of things do you do? Do you travel? Do you do webinar? Do you do Zoom? I would love to help others invest in relationships as well.
Yeah, so we have invested heavily because legal is a very relationship intensive business. So we, in 2014, when we were first really ramping up, I did 22 roadshows in other cities through ILTA. So these are lunch and learns essentially. And I also did 5 conferences that year that were 3 to 5 days long. I used to have hair before that and less bags under my eyes. That was a grind, but that was the beginning. Since then, we do a ton of webinars. I have a podcast called Legal Innovation Spotlight. We're about 65 episodes in, been doing it for about a year and a half, a little longer. And I interview the who's who of legal innovation, which is a very hot topic right now with AI making its way into the industry, that is going to completely transform how law firms operate. And we're pretty far along in adoption and understanding of that technology. And I speak at we attend about a dozen conferences a year today. I speak at probably 8 of them, maybe even more. So it is a huge investment. It is a big part of my job description as CEO. I spend as much time building and these relationships and creating visibility for our brand as I do traditional CEO activities.
There's so much gold in everything you just said, just as your experience at this. So let's just first start with going what you started with. You said when you first did the launch, and is this, when you say the 22 roadshows, was this in 2020 when you relaunched it, or are you talking all the way back in 2010?
All the way back, yeah. When we were trying to build momentum, Jim Collins in Good to Great talks about pushing the flywheel, right? That was us pushing the flywheel. And when you're first starting out, it is a grind. So to build that legal Rolodex, I had to get in front of people and demonstrate credibility and build relationships, shake hands, ask questions, be genuinely interested in their challenges. And over time, that snowballs. And now we don't do roadshows as much anymore. Most of our activities are virtual. And then we have 12 conferences that are really it's a one-to-many activity. The roadshows would anywhere from 20 to 60 people would show up in person. So much lower leverage there.
Just to be clear, when you're saying roadshow, can you take us through what a roadshow, like an example of one?
Yeah, so they're essentially lunch and learns. So we did it through ILTA, which is the International Legal Technology Association. A law firm would host us. We would buy everybody lunch. They would promote it, and then we'd talk about a topic of interest. And it's not a sales pitch. It's us educating the market. So back in 2014, there was a new version of SharePoint that came out, and I think our topic then was 2013, what's new for legal? How can law firms benefit from this platform? I didn't go in there and do a sales pitch. It was really just about building credibility and relationships.
And when you said you did it through ILTA, meaning they had a database of law firms and you were able to connect with, I don't know if you pay for that list or something else. You say, oh, I got you from ILTA. We're members too. We would love to come do a lunch and learn.
Exactly. Yeah. Every AM law firm, I believe, is a member of ILTA. So they've got great coverage near the top of the market. Want a 200 attorney, maybe a little bit less market share there, but the 200 attorney and up space, they have just about every firm as a member.
How important do you think it is today, if you were launching a new product or service, to actually do roadshows in person versus it's so tempting to do it on Zoom? Would you be doing that same, if you had the time and energy, would you be doing that same formula today that you did 10 years ago if you were building a new product? Or would you recommend others, a better question, who are really trying to get exposure?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So the biggest hurdle today is remote and hybrid work. People just aren't in the office as much. So what we have found is conferences are a better choice. So again, it's a higher cost, but we do fewer of them. So we do about 12 a year, so one a month. And I typically speak at them about not just technology. I'm an industry analyst. Like I study the law firm industry broadly and talk about trends. Innovation is a big part of what I typically speak about, and a lot of the headwinds. Law firms have a ton of headwinds to innovation. The partnership model is anti-innovative by its structure. It's really consensus-driven decision-making, creates tremendous friction in aligning convergent interests. You've got law firm leaders who that demographic skews much older. They have retirement horizons that impair their motivation to make long-term investments. The lateral mobility of lawyers in big law, which we jokingly call hotels for lawyers, big law firms, they can pick up their book of business and move down the street. That also impairs long-term investment activities. So I speak very broadly. It's not just about tech, and that widens my net with the stakeholders who I can get in front of.
And when you say you attend 12 shows a year, are you have a booth at 12 shows, or some of them you're just attendees?
Yeah, so we are typically sponsors at all of them. Whether or not we have a booth depends on the size of the show. So the big one is ILTACon, which is ILTA's conference. We have a booth and bring 7 or 8 people to that. Some of the smaller ones that we do are 80 to 300 attendees. And typically you have a table where at breaks people come and talk to you. But I bring my sales folks for that. I'm really focused on thought leadership activities and getting in there. And I'm one of the crew in the legal knowledge management group. I've been around for a long time. I have personal relationships with these people. So yeah, that's the playbook.
So it seems like on all of these, you're not just going as an attendee. You're either a sponsor, you have a booth, but you're there with some sort of anchor that people know Infodash is part of this conference in some form. Now, I'm really interested, and obviously you can't just start a company and have all this expertise, but I'm interested in how you say you speak at 8 of them. Because that is something that, of course, more legal tech entrepreneurs want to do. It's a great way to thought leadership, to get your name out there. what is the process that you have that you can share that would be inspiration or helpful for somebody who's, okay, I want to speak at more conferences. I'm overwhelmed. Do I just submit? And also, I understand that you're living and breathing this. And this is maybe don't answer this yet. So I'll just say it, but don't answer. Is like, how do you have time to continue to learn and dive deep, more than just surface level, to dive deep? So hold off on that one, but just first on the getting booked. Matt, if I want to get booked at these 12 conferences, are you just going to the RFPs and submitting them, or is it more specific to that?
Yeah, it's a lot of people now know me on the speaker circuit, so I get invited. In fact, my last conference I spoke at, I was the MC. So I did the opening presentation and then introduced all the other speakers and connected the dots between sessions. But yeah, the journey to get there it took a while. It's not something you can do in a year or even 2 years, but 3 years, 5 years, you can get there. And how I do it is not only do I go to these conferences, I don't stay in the exhibit hall. I attend the sessions and I listen and I read a ton of papers. So on the academic side of the house, there's all sorts of great information coming out about the new capabilities of artificial intelligence and how it relates to AI. Stanford has Codex, which is like a legal tech incubator, if you will. They bring in speakers. There's a ton of thought leaders in that world that I follow. LinkedIn is actually a great resource. I follow a lot of thought leaders in that space. I attend webinars. American Lawyer Magazine just had a webinar this week on the AmLaw 100 and what they're seeing from a business trends perspective, revenue, partnership, equity and non-equity, new pricing models. I really pay attention to the actual business itself, and that has allowed me to generate the credibility to get speaking gigs.
And I understand all that, and it's great to hear it. The challenge is when you get to the day of being a CEO. It's what I do as well. If you don't set the time aside in your schedule to learn and to think and to focus, it's the day comes and then your family and then all this stuff. How are you able to, in this crazy world that we're in right now, to actually sit down and get that deep work done and learn?
It's a really good question. And a lot of my peers ask that too. Dude, when are you being a CEO? You got a podcast that comes out every week. I see you posting on LinkedIn all the time. So I've done that a couple of ways. One is I maximize downtime. I am always listening to podcasts. There's almost never a time, unless I'm brain dead, on the way home from a conference, I'm rarely listening to a podcast because there's fatigue sets in. But there are amazing podcasts out there. So when I'm driving, when I'm at the gym, I actually spend time on the weekends before my kids get up. I get up early and I spend 3-4 hours on Saturday and Sunday doing this sort of stuff. Another key enabler for me is the team. So when I owned AcroWire, I was the only owner. I have 3 partners now that really help tremendously with the execution of the business that allows me to focus. That's not always an option as a startup. We're not a startup anymore. We're considered early stage, but building out an organizational structure that allows you the time is mandatory.
So that's fascinating. That you shared that when you had the original business before you relaunched, it was just you. And then when you relaunched at Infodash, you had 3 partners. Can you share a little bit about that story? Because that's fascinating.
Yeah, I'm going to be candid here and vulnerable for a minute. So when I was doing it by myself, I almost drove myself into the ground. That 2014 year was not a great year for my marriage because I was on the road so much. I had 2 young kids and my wife was really had to take the brunt of the child raising activities. So when we decided to pivot to a product company, I promised her I'm not going to do that again. So I had 2 people that I worked with. One was our former CFO and our CTO at AcroWire. And then I brought a 3rd guy in who I'd known for 10 years, who worked in consulting for years. And man, it doesn't always work out. And people are, especially in EO and YPO circles, are like, don't ever give away equity. I think that's terrible advice. The right advice is if you're going to do it wisely. And I did it wisely and I chose carefully. It still could have blown up in my face. And I now have a support system. I'm not worried about those guys going anywhere. We've got a huge exit coming our way if we do things right and they see that and understand that. They're not going anywhere. Yeah, it's unfortunate that people get caught in this mindset of, I can't give away any equity. We also have given some to early hires in the form of shadow equity, which essentially is just financial upside if they stick around. I'm a big believer in it, and I think it's unfortunate that EO circles really tend to be so black and white with that. It's not a black and white conversation, in my opinion.
Thank you for being vulnerable
Yeah.
about the struggle of being an entrepreneur. Can I ask how old your kids are now?
Yeah, they are 13 and 10.
Okay.
So they were really young, and I
Yeah.
had this mindset that looking back, it was so flawed, but I didn't realize it at the time. My mindset was, I'm going to work my ass off while they are too young to form memories. And I let everything else stay on the back burner. My health, my marriage, and man, it all came crashing down. I got to a place where I was having 2 to 3 migraines a week. I had gotten to 30% body fat. I've always been lean and in shape because I was eating on the road and not exercising. And man, it all came crashing down and I had to reset and pivot. And it was a big wake up call.
I swear to God, I have chills right now hearing that because you just gave version A of the story. Then you gave, okay, let me tell you the version B of the story. Like all that's true, but here's what that led to. And one of the reasons I say that is I know so many people, including myself, who want to be exceptional in something or in life or in business. The challenge is, are you willing and able to make the sacrifices with your time, with your energy, with everything else to be exceptional in that one area? And how does that affect everything else if you can get that? And that's where my daily struggle or my regular struggle is. In 2019, moved with my family at that time. I had a 5-year-old and 10-year-old boy-girl twins from New York to Barcelona. And this was right before COVID. And we lived in Barcelona for 2 years. And I knew that would probably lead to less focus in some areas. But the life journey, and you can always make more money. You can't make more time. And you can't, and those core memories and how it shifted us and changed us forever was something that I decided was important to me. Luckily, Lawline grew even more while I was away. I think COVID had something to do with that, obviously. But not only COVID had something to do with that, when I left, there was only 2 people remote. By the time I came back, the entire company was remote. And so we all ended up being on the same page. So you never know which path things are going to take. Just a couple of things you said that I wanted to ask you about. You mentioned you listen to a lot of podcasts. Is there a couple that you can share with us that are top of mind, or you feel free to look them up if you have it near you?
Yeah, no, I know the ones I listen to regularly off the top of my head. So I'm an AI junkie. There's a podcast called The Artificial Intelligence Show, Mike Raitzer and Mike Kaput. It is fantastic. Can't say enough good things about those guys. And the focus there is artificial intelligence and what's coming. And they take a very practical, pragmatic view on the current state and future state of the technology. For my entrepreneurial fix, I listen to a podcast called Lawline, and that's put on by a group of high growth entrepreneurs that are very practical and hands on. That's an excellent one. The All In podcast there's a bunch of guys, including David Sachs, who's now a White House advisor on cryptocurrency, and Chamath, and there's a bunch. That's the who's who of Silicon Valley, part of that. For folks, if you've got a legal audience here, honestly, the podcast that I host called Legal Innovation Spotlight is outstanding, and it's very much not focused just on technology, but the business of law itself. There's some other good ones in the legal tech space, Pioneers and Podcasts. I'm sorry, Pioneers and Pathfinders. That is excellent. And then The Geek in Review is another legal tech podcast that I think is very good.
Thank you for that. And those will all be easily accessible once it goes live. In 2006, this is really before podcasts even started. I started a public access TV show and also a YouTube channel called True NYC. I was in law school and I wanted to start my own business. And I was interviewing entrepreneurs trying to find that magic answer to start a business. And what I learned, and when I look back at those 100 interviews that I did, like Simon Sinek was like my 5th interview. I met him through EO. He came and spoke at our accelerator. By the way, I was in the first accelerator program for EO as globally in 2007, I think. And he came and spoke, and I'm like, this guy is unbelievable. He's going to be amazing. And like, he came to my office the next day and we did the interview, and it was like, I knew he was special, and it was more people like him. And what I realized looking back and obviously doing it, and I ended up interviewing a web development firm and all these places, it was the relationships that I made from the people that I interviewed and what I learned from them that was all that transformed. I met EO just to say, I was walking around Cranes. Like when I thought I was all cool. I was walking around at a Cranes conference and I'm like, oh, there's lots of entrepreneurs here. And I met this guy. He's like, oh, I'm part of this organization called EO. If you want, come to our board meeting. We'll send out an email to the whole chapter and you can interview anybody you want in our chapter. That's how I got introduced to EO.
Very cool.
And so right there through the podcast, and I'm like, as I was thinking about this, it was maybe this November, I'm like, that was one of the best times in my life. All the energy that I got and what I want to do, I'm looking to make more transformations again. I'm looking to build Lawline to the next phase. I'm looking to get energized. I said, okay, let me take out the playbook that I did in 2006 and let me start a podcast. And let me call it Lawyers Who Learn, because Lawline is the largest provider of online CLE, but 98% of learning doesn't happen in CLE. It happens in the law. So all that buildup is to ask you, how much has you talked about relationships and you mentioned your podcast as a result of that. Take us through, and I watched some of yours and I got imposter syndrome watching you do a podcast. I'm like, oh, he's good. But tell us about how your journey of the podcast, well, how it's mirrored mine, how it's different from mine. And so everybody start a podcast in legal tech and all that?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Really good question. So what's interesting is I never had any ambitions to be a podcast host. Never. I did it because I had a few Zoom calls with a couple of people in the industry that they weren't sales calls. They were just conversations with people I hadn't caught up with in a while. And because I had a little bit of a dark period between when we ended AcroWire and started Infodash, I didn't attend conferences. We were heads down in R&D. And I recorded a couple of the calls and I went back and listened. I was like, dude, this is really good. I should air this. And then I was like, they didn't know they were being recorded. That's not the right approach. So I decided to do 3 pilot episodes, and I got people who I had really good chemistry with, and they went really well. And I released them right before the ILTACon conference, which is like 4,000 people. And I was like, man, nobody's going to listen. I probably not even going to know it exists. I probably had a dozen people come by the booth and go, that podcast was awesome. And I'm thinking, how the hell did you even find it? Like, I posted on LinkedIn, but one of my partners, and I bust his chops about this all the time, said, I know there's a lot of things we can be doing, but is that something we really should be doing? He's a complete believer today. Real quick story. This happened on Easter Sunday, just a couple of days ago, and a managing partner of a 1,000 attorney firm sent me a text message. I had met him one time before. He happens to be here in St. Louis, and said, I listen to your podcast every week and I want to have breakfast with you. Okay, this is a $1 billion organization. If you have 1,000 attorneys, if you're in the Am Law, you average about $1 million in revenue per attorney. It's probably over $1 billion. Sent me a text message and said he wanted to chat. I have gotten multiple speaking gigs because of the podcast. I have met some of the most influential people in all of legal, not just legal tech, as a result of this. My podcast is called Legal Innovation Spotlight. The award I won is Innovative Leader of the Year. I think the podcast had a lot to do with that recognition. So it has been an absolute game changer. Should everybody do it? No. And I think you got to ask yourself, one, are you able to commit to a cadence? If you're going to do it less than once a week, you're going to have a hard time holding people's attention, because what happens is, like with me, I probably listen to 7, 8 hours worth of podcasts a week. I'm addicted, but most people have maybe one or two. And if you're not regularly getting in front of them with new content, they'll go elsewhere. So can you do it? Do you have the skills to do it? I didn't think I did. I'm good at having conversation. That translated in, I have no training. I read one book and I got halfway through it and I was like, this is dumb. I'm just going to do it. So
Hyper focused, or maybe that's the wrong term. Are you in who the guest is? How important is that to you?
very, yeah, it's very important. And what I don't do is I don't bait and switch my guests. So in other words, I don't invite you on because you could be a potential buyer and then hit you up with a sales pitch afterwards. I don't do it. My reputation is too important, but I absolutely go after the people who are moving and shaking in the industry. That could be law firm chief knowledge officers or chief innovation officers. It could be consultants. I've had the CEO of Litera, which is, I don't know, 300, 400, $500 million company, the CEO of Elite on the podcast. Again, hundreds of millions in revenue. I've had the managing director of the legal
Those
tech fund.
wouldn't even be customers for you. Those are just,
No,
yeah. And so when you forget the CEO of Litera as an example, are you cold emailing them? Is somebody, you have a team who's doing this for you? How are you setting this up?
met him at a conference.
Okay.
Yeah, met him at a conference, shook his hand, established rapport. While I was there, I was like, man, you're an articulate guy. Pay him a compliment. I'd love to have you on the podcast sometime. He was like, sure, absolutely.
And when you go into that conversation, unlike me, are you going in with a clear agenda of what you're trying to ask him, or you're just like, let me see where this conversation goes?
Yeah, no, I'm pretty structured about it, probably more structured than I have to be. So what I typically do is I have a quick 30-minute planning call and we talk about the agenda, and then I record it. I upload the transcript into Claude AI with a custom project that is trained to build out an agenda for me. I make a few tweaks and I send it to them. With the people who their time is extremely valuable, I'll wing it, but I will still send in a proposed agenda ahead of time. I find that works really well, and we keep it conversational, but I have a framework on the topics that we cover.
And are you focused more on the topic or more on the person?
The first part of the conversation is a brief intro. I tee them up for an intro, just like you did. The actual meat of the conversation, I go through their LinkedIn posts. If they're active on LinkedIn, if they're not, I'll just do a Google search and see what they like to talk about. And I will structure the agenda to align with that.
My theory, what gives me energy is I think everyone has a story to tell. Whether you're a very well-known attorney at a big law firm, you're just a startup, or somewhere in between, especially as an attorney, you've accomplished something, or if somebody who sells to attorney. And so I get energy, at least at this stage, of not necessarily getting all the top people from here or all this. I want to get different people from different parts of law and see how they learn and how they struggle, and see what the themes are in between. And that's interesting to me. I just interviewed like the GC of Zendesk, and then I interviewed someone at a big law, and we both know this is being recorded. We both know it's for a podcast. And many times during these interviews, people are telling me, you said something vulnerable. People go so deep. And at the end after it's recording, I'm like, are you okay with that? And they're like, yeah, that's fine. And I'm like, wow. And I feel honored many times that people go so deep, especially when a big law lawyer was telling me how he struggles leading. And I'm like, are you okay? People listening to you who's there? Yeah, that's fine. And it just humanized him, obviously. Do you feel that as well? Do you feel humbled, like that people are telling you things, like you said, that are being recorded, that'll go out there?
Totally. Yeah. And just to be clear, in the beginning, I was really focused on who I had on, just to build credibility for the brand of the podcast. Since then, I feel like we've got enough momentum where I can take some risks and maybe take a chance with somebody who doesn't perfectly align with my audience's interest. But yeah, I hear stories about tough times when XYZ company was going through major acquisition phase and the struggles they had integrating them and the struggles that created for their customers. And I hear lawyers talk about how what a struggle it is for their firm to really embed innovation in their culture because it's such a industry that it's just not deeply rooted in the culture. So I am blown away by it, and honestly, it makes for the best content. Whenever I post anything on LinkedIn that's vulnerable, 4 or 5x the engagement. It's
Always.
incredible.
Yeah, and again, because my goal is to meet as many great people as possible, that's why I'm doing it twice a week. It does take a lot more energy than I anticipated, but I love it. And to your point, one area where I would love more downloads. I would love more views. And I know we're getting some, and I know we're getting good amount. And I know people say something. I have this thing that I know these interviews are great. And I think one of the things we're also using Descript. I don't know what you're using for your interviews, is the clips to build a machine of clips because it's really hard to get someone to watch the 60-minute episode or listen to it. But if you can get clips going, do you do that with any of your episodes, and what tools do you use?
Yeah, so we use Riverside FM as a
Yep.
podcasting tool, and it's got magic clips as part of it. We've tried Opus Clip, which is another good tool. Honestly, Riverside does almost everything we need. We've found that we haven't had to leverage other tools, but sharing clips is a great way. One thing I will say, I've been doing this for, I don't know, 18 months now, is we've had to pivot. If you get too predictable in your format, it does impact your engagement. So now we're also integrating different formats like LinkedIn carousels, sometimes just plain text posts. LinkedIn is an art. You really have to spend some time. I don't know why they gave me a top voice badge. I still don't know
saw
why.
that.
I have no idea. You know why I think it is? And this might be something your audience is interested in. It happened right after the last ILTACon. I broadcast live from this conference on LinkedIn. I did for 8 hours, 2 4-hour blocks, and I did it LinkedIn live, and I scheduled the guests, and in between guests, I posted the schedule. So people who couldn't go to the conference, it was a way for them to experience it right after and we used really high quality video. I flew a videographer in, and man, after that somehow the badge popped up. They sent me an email and said, congratulations. They didn't tell me why. I don't know. It's cool. I don't know what it means, but I'll take it.
Are you still doing LinkedIn Lives?
All the time. Yeah. In fact, I got one on Thursday. On any of your audience, this will be in the past, but they could still go look at it. We're going to talk about Copilot versus ChatGPT and Claude.
That's a good conversation. And those are not considered podcasts. Those are just lives, you call them?
Yeah, those are LinkedIn Lives.
Awesome. Anything, we've hit it time, right? I could talk to you for hours, obviously, and you have so much knowledge. This is like all the notes that I've taken from what you just said.
Nice.
But is there anything that we didn't cover? I started off asking any questions you never got asked that you want to talk about. Is there anything we didn't cover? I heard you say AI a lot. I didn't go there because that in itself is a whole conversation and a half times 10. And I wanted to talk about you. But besides obviously diving deep into AI and obviously if you're LinkedIn Live, is there anything else you would have loved to cover more?
Yeah, if your audience is lawyers, I'd love to engage with your audience members on LinkedIn. I talk about the business of law quite a bit, and I find it very fascinating. And I think we're at a real inflection point in the industry where product market fit for traditional legal services is dying very quickly. And we have to develop a new pricing model, a new client engagement model, a new internal firm compensation model, a new lateral movement model. It's a really interesting time for the industry. And I would encourage, and people ask me sometimes, like, why are you always beating this drum? You're a legal tech vendor and you're always talking about what law firms need to do. I'm entirely dependent on law firms. If the big law business, I don't think it's going anywhere, by the way. I just think it's going to change, and there are going to be winners and losers. There's going to be a reshuffling of the deck in big law because I see law firms who really get and are investing in AI, and I see others that are deer in the headlights. And they need to be law firms. If you're out there and you work at a law firm, you need to think about AI as an R&D initiative, not what ROI am I going to get out of buying this new tool. It's R&D, it's long term. Don't think about ROI today. It's an investment. And if you're not making that investment today, tomorrow things are going to change so quickly that I worry that firms who wait are going to get left behind.
I think it's a great way to end it. I would say this, while in general, the legal space is laggards when it comes to technology, this is one area where I see so many firms actually not the laggards, actually because of how AI is perfect for the data of law and the legal research and all the information that's there. It's meant for lawyers and what they're doing. And of course, it's not just law, how education everything is going to be affected. And certainly those who don't pay attention will do so at their own peril. And I'm so glad that you got the dress code for this podcast.
Nice.
Most people do not match me as perfectly as you have. I really appreciate all your time, Ted, and everything that you've shared. And hopefully this is just the beginning of us getting to know each other. And maybe I'll find you at one of these 12 conferences. I'm sure some overlap. I've never been to ILTA because for continuing education, I don't know if it's the right fit, but there's certain things that we are launching that it may make sense, but I would love to meet you in person and get to know you more.
I'll be in New York City next week. Looks like you're local there. I'll send you my
this recorded when we stop right now. I'm going to see if I can get you on a time.
All right. That's perfect.
Thanks so much.
All righty.